That's.
Let's get started.
Oh, I think that came out of the jar.
Okay. Like to welcome everyone to the April 16th, 2025 Cottonwood Heights City Planning Commission work session. Couple of items for tonight. For the work session is we'll talk about items in the business session, which include a public hearing of potential action on a request by James Carroll for a Cottonwood compounding conditional use permit. And then also in our business meeting, we'll review and for potential action on staff for the staff initiated zoning text amendment about live work. And then we have consent agenda. So go ahead and get started with the request for the compounding pharmacy.
Okay, we'll get that pulled up while Ian's getting that set up or while Matt Irvin lets me into the Zoom meeting. Just a few staff changes, staff updates to update you all on. As you know, I don't know, a couple months ago at this point, Samantha left the city, take employment elsewhere. Rather than rehire a senior planner position, we've kind of restructured our department. So Ian has been promoted to planner 3.
Oh, congratulations.
And then Maverick, who I think has presented a couple times to you all. He mainly works with our building permits and the zoning review for that right now. But he's been promoted to planner 2. So you'll be seeing a lot more of him
Great.
moving forward. And then we have hired, and she hasn't started yet, a community development coordinator that will kind of backfill in that permit management side of things at the front counter. So
Very cool.
come May 5th, we'll have a full staff again and we'll be off and running and
Awesome.
life's great.
And whatever will you do with yourself?
Yeah. Well,
I wish it were like that.
don't have that problem.
Congratulations, Ian, and congratulations to Maverick. That's awesome.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
we look forward to the new person joining the team
Absolutely.
as well.
We do as well.
That's awesome. Okay, well,
there's
love
Mr.
that.
Shelton.
Love that.
Am I on time?
Hi, Mike.
Sorry.
Okay. All right, so,
Yeah.
without further ado. Is it Ian? Are you doing
Yes, it
Yes.
is me. I'm just gonna join the meeting really quick and then I just saved this presentation as a PDF file, so it shouldn't give us any trouble. Just give me 1 second. While Zoom picks up. Matt, you didn't really miss anything. So, or Mike, sorry.
All right.
You're here right on time for the.
Well,
project.
you missed the announcement that Ian's been promoted.
That's all. right.
And that's
That's
awesome.
great.
So it's Maverick, and then they have a new person. They have a new
It's all
person
of us, yeah.
joining their team in May.
Yes, we're really excited for it. Okay. Presentation should pull up there. Okay, there we are.
I'm sorry, I should note too that Commissioner Barnes is online via
Yeah.
Zoom.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Okay, all right. So this is, like Lucy said, an application for a compounding pharmacy at 7076 South Highland Drive. This is our 3rd conditional use permit of the year, the first one that's gone to you guys. This is kind of a summary of what's being requested. Our mapping system has been updated, so it's a lot darker than it used to be. So apologies if you can't see it. It's much better on the TV behind me. This property is just on Highland, just south of Fort Union Boulevard, highlighted by this blue box here. It's just a small office building with kind of an orange roof and brick siding. There's a picture of it coming up. I'm sure it'll ring a bell for you guys and you'll probably drive past it all the time. Yeah, and our recommendation for this is to approve, and I'll kind of go more into depth on this application and why we're recommending approval. So again, this is a request to operate a compounding pharmacy within an existing building. This is allowed as a conditional use within the CR regional commercial zone. The pharmacy's hours of operation would be from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. This business actually currently operates at the property that's directly north of the subject property of this application. I'm trying to get my directions, so that's incorrect there. Is it north or is it south? North. Okay, north, yes. There's approximately 15 employees of this business, and there's about 20 to 30 in-person customers per day per the applicant's narrative, which is in your staff report. Here's the staff report for you. And They've also noted in their narrative that most of the pharmacy's clients have their medication mailed to them rather than picking the pharmaceuticals up. So that means that, you know, they have more customers than their in-person counts would suggest. They don't plan any site changes for the property, but they do plan a facade remodel. They currently have an application going to the Architectural Review Committee meeting next week for that remodel. And then I'll also just note that they plan interior renovations for the change in use, and they've applied for a building permit. This suite used to be a salon, so there's pretty extensive renovations on the inside. So just to give you a bit more context, this is the zoning map of the property. Again, it's much better on the TV behind me. And this is a street view of the building where this pharmacy is going into. They'd be occupying the first floor. The top floor is occupied by a Pilates studio. You can see it's surrounded by regional commercial zoning. There's a bit of multifamily near the south, but it's kind of in that sea of office buildings along Highland Drive there. Then this is a site plan of the property. No major changes are proposed that would warrant a separate review. It's kind of remaining as is. You can see here the kind of the parking layout where the building is on the property. There's 30 parking stalls. I'll get a little bit more into that further down the line, this presentation. And then here we have, kind of shows you the existing floor plan and then the proposed floor plan. You can see there's a lot of walls going up on the inside and pretty extensive changes. I think the applicant can confirm this, but I believe the entrance to this suite and to the suite upstairs is via that stairwell that's on the north side of the property. So kind of where this cloud is, where my mouse is, it's kind of changing, but you can see this cloud. A customer would enter here and then go into the suite here. It's shown a little bit better on the proposed floor plan where this sort of lobby would be. And there's Sean. Hi, Sean.
Let's go.
Yes, it's good.
Sorry for my turn.
No, you're good. So I'll kind of go into the staff analysis of this project, unless you guys have any questions at this point.
Actually, I do, and it's back on the summary page. So in the packet that we had, it says the subject property is on Pine Creek Lane.
Oh, that's incorrect. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Okay, well,
that's an error.
but I thought it was correct in what you showed us.
Yeah, no, on the staff report, it's incorrect. It is Highland Drive.
Yeah,
77 Highland Drive.
that was the. I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
one thing I had.
Neither Mike nor I caught that when we reviewed the staff report. Sorry about that. We use a template when we write the report, so that was just from a previous application.
Okay.
So yeah, 7076 South Highland is the correct address. Okay, going into the analysis. Drugstores are listed as a conditional use in the CR zone. Our city code doesn't get as specific as a compounding pharmacy, but we think that a pharmacy is analogous to a drugstore, and we're comfortable making that analogy in the uses. I'll just note that other pharmacies like Walgreens, CVS, and even this Cottonwood Compounding Pharmacy are operating currently in the CR zone in our city. Again, they operate at a property that's directly north of the exact same zoning. So there's definitely precedent for this in the zone. As a conditional use, this is kind of the state code that the application is entitled to approval unless reasonable conditions can't be imposed to mitigate negative impacts of the use. And that's just the direct wording from state code there. It basically says the same thing. As far as parking and traffic goes, our city code requires minimum parking that's derived from the ITE parking generation manual. That's an engineering manual that looks at how much parking is required or how much parking is used on average by certain land use types. At approximately 3,100 square feet, the manual would require a total of 8 stalls for this particular use. The business, like all the businesses in the city, would be responsible for maintaining the availability of those stalls for staff and customers. Like it's on the site plan, the property contains 30 stalls total. And the required parking for the proposed use, I'll just note, is less than the requirement for the previous salon use. So they're kind of reducing their impact there.
So the 30 stalls is all of it, which would include the parking for those going to the Pilates or.
Correct.
And for employees.
Correct.
So I think there were 15 employees, which may not be there every day.
Right.
But, okay.
Yes, that's correct. We found that this was consistent with minimum parking requirements and it wouldn't merit a traffic impact study based on the proposed use. So that's our analysis there. Kind of jumping over to the procedure for conditional use permits. You guys are the approval authority for all administrative applications, including conditional use approval that's requested by this project. You can find the details of your authority in the staff report, but I didn't want to list all the bullets and words out here. As far as noticing goes, I'll just note that we followed our policy with noticing. It was noticed 10 days prior. Mailers were sent out to people within 300 feet of the property. We didn't get any public comments, probably because this business is already operating at the parcel directly to the north, so it's not a huge change or impact. And then just again, we found that this application was code compliant as outlined in the staff report. Our findings of fact are listed in there. There's about 15 points, so I didn't want to put them all in this slide, but we recommend approval without any additional conditions. So that's pretty much the content that I have for you. Do you guys have any questions for me?
So the parking again, how many stalls are there?
In the entire
Yeah.
parking lot, there's 30 stalls
30 stalls.
and
And so they'll,
3 ADA stalls.
so they'll need 15 for their employees.
Well, not all employees, I imagine, will be there at the exact same time.
Oh, they won't?
That's just the total number of employees they have. The applicant would speak to how many
Okay,
employees they
great,
have on
great.
site at a time, but yeah, 15 total.
Yeah, I mean, Pilates studios, I would imagine, use a lot and then none, a lot and then
Sure,
none. And so
yeah.
just in terms of making sure everybody's gonna be able to play well together in the sandbox, I'll look forward to hearing from the applicant about how that.
Yeah,
This is a novel use, and the fact that most of our customers are remote, but just, I mean, it was a salon before, so I mean,
Mhm.
Yeah.
they're just, how is the traffic gonna change and is everybody okay with that and ready for that?
yeah. And I'll just remind the applicant that at 6 PM, we'll move into the big room over there, and that's when you'll be invited up to speak. So to address any questions that the commission has.
I would imagine that might be less parking needed for this than there was for the salon, but
Yeah,
at
the
any given time too, like it is for Pilates.
the salon use, if it were proposed today, it would require 10 stalls. This requires 8, so it's at least judged by this parking generation manual that the city uses to have less of an impact.
For sure, this is definitely like a soft question. I mean, the hard answer is that it's fine.
Yeah.
But I think the soft answer is like, I mean, let's not put a functioning Pilates business out of business. If they're like, listen, we've got 20 reformers. If they've got 20 reformers, that's a potential for 20 people in there at the same time. And if 15 stalls are taken by employees, people are gonna bump into each other. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure they've thought through that. I'm sure that discussion's already been had. I'll look forward to hearing.
Yeah, the applicant is, I believe you guys are the owner of the building as well, so
Yeah.
they can probably answer some questions about their Pilates
Awesome.
studio tenants.
One other question about, and it's not specifically for us, but when the meeting is taking place with ARC, is it to review the full facelift of the front? Is that what it?
Yes, it's for a certificate of design compliance, which I don't have the application form in front of me that lists out.
Yeah, it's
the-
okay. I was just curious, but
requirements.
that's what it would be.
They're
Yeah,
putting,
they're-
they're painting the building and putting some new architectural treatments on it.
So
Okay.
they're,
No site changes, but some
Yeah.
aesthetic changes to the building.
Okay.
they're reviewing that, they're reviewing the proposed materials and colors. I think that's kind of the meat of what they'll be.
Okay,
reviewing.
perfect.
Commissioner Barnes, online
Yes.
questions?
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
So the reason for us to review this is just because it's a conditional use and the policy requires that.
Yeah,
Sounds
it-
like it's kind of a slam dunk.
It seems a little odd because the business is right next door in the same zone and, the same exact area, but conditional uses they're looked at on a site by site basis, and there's not been a use like this established on this site previously.
Yeah, we checked the business licensing for the property and unfortunately there wasn't anything that was similar to this use. Otherwise, we could approve it without going through this process.
I appreciate the hygiene of you guys doing. I mean, it's just better.
Thank you.
Okay. No,
So my understanding, not a lot of drive-in traffic to this, mostly, you said that, it's mostly
That's-
by
that's what the
mail that they do
applicant-
the business, so
Yeah, that's what the
So it
applicant
should
stated
have a
in their
little-
narrative.
little impact on parking and other things.
yeah,
So they can speak towards their total customer count, but they stated that the vast majority of their customers get their pharmaceuticals mailed to them, so.
Well, typically a pickup, even compared to the previous hair salon use, that
Right.
1 to 5 minutes if you have to wait,
Yeah.
as opposed to, a longer time to get a haircut, so.
But also if they decided to convert to pick up there, the impact is going to be still approved under this conditional use, is that correct?
There was a drive-through.
Well,
Not a
drive-through,
drive-through,
no.
but I'm
Parking,
saying-
parking required was based on square feet, not on their narrative. So
Okay.
unless they expanded the building, then the 8 stalls would be the requirement.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, if they decided, hey, we also want to have, less of the online
Yeah.
impact, that the impact is not going to necessarily be needing to come back to us for conditional use for that change,
It's
right?
use and square footage.
Okay.
If they expanded the building and modified their site plan, it would come back to the planning commission.
I'll just note, like as a technicality, the parking requirement that was calculated, those 8 stalls was for a pharmacy without a drive-through pickup. So, if they wanted to change that in the future, we'd look at whether or not they meet that description, but yeah, that's how the impact for parking was calculated at least.
And I think drive-through would be very difficult on that site.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah,
anyways, so.
Great,
It's awesome. 2 thriving Cottonwood Heights businesses.
yeah,
Yeah,
love it. Okay, thanks, Ian.
thank you.
And now we'll move to live work definition.
Yeah.
I'll pull up the memo, it's just on this.
We'll get this up here. So, some context, you'll all be very familiar with this. I'd say in the last month or two, the city council issued a moratorium on live work spaces as a land use type, within the neighborhood commercial, zoning district. That was the only place that listed that use specifically. They put a moratorium on that and directed staff to prepare a definition for what live work spaces meant. Because as the commission found out during a previous land use application on Bengal Boulevard, there was no codified definition of live workspace within the Cottonwood Heights City Code. That previous application has since been withdrawn, but the moratorium is still in place, and we've got 6 months or 180 days to either amend the code in the way that the city wants to, or the moratorium lifts and reverts to what it previously was. So we've taken an initial shot at defining live workspaces, and are bringing that to the commission for discussion tonight. I think we still have a couple of months to work this process out. So if you're not ready to vote or make a recommendation tonight, that's totally okay. If you'd like to see more information or more research, we're happy to come back with that. Ultimately, this will be a legislative action item, so any vote by the commission will be a recommendation to the city council. When we looked at various definitions, what we kind of found is there's not a cut and dry, generally accepted definition for live workspaces. It is fairly different everywhere we've seen it. In highly urban areas, the focus is more on commercial space than residential. In some others, it's just a mix. Some defined minimum square footages for each uses, some limited the number of units per certain square footage of residential or of commercial. Based on the discussion that was prompted by the previous land use application, it seemed like the main concerns were in that neighborhood commercial zone, making sure there was enough of a commercial presence, that the balance between commercial and residential was more well defined. So that's kind of the approach we took, while also trying to make it generally easy to administer from a staff level, because you can get really fancy with floor area ratios and percentage of ground level space per foot of frontage and things like that. So what we've come up with is a general definition. This would be nested in the definitions section of the city code, so that if live workspace were added anywhere else in the future, this would apply. But we've come up with a working point of this definition here of a living unit used simultaneously for both residential occupancy and commercial activity by the same occupant. The commercial portion of the live workspace that shall constitute a minimum of 25% of the total gross floor area of the entire unit, with 50% of the unit's frontage at ground level along the public right of way being dedicated to the commercial portion of the space. And then just clarifying that whatever that commercial use is should be an allowed use in that underlying zone as well. So this was an attempt to try to establish some parameters for how much commercial space there is in comparison to residential. A quarter of that use should be commercial, and then making sure there's ground level activity, commercial activity activated along the public right of way. That's a starting point. You mind scrolling down, Ian, and then I'll turn it over to the commission. There's some alternatives here. We can add other regulations, we could add a hard square footage number. I think that was thrown out in one of the discussions of a minimum size of commercial space. I don't know, 350 square feet or something is ringing a bell.
I think it's per unit for a townhome.
Sure, okay. So you could look at things like that, you know, restricting or limiting commercial uses. There's some parking concerns, imposing size requirements on commercial space. You could flat out recommend removal of live work as an allowed use in the neighborhood commercial zone. You know, there's different directions we can go with this, but in trying to balance everything we heard, we came up with the definition here and turn it back to you for discussion.
Could you put a map up at exactly where live work is?
Yeah.
Allowed currently, or I guess in the moratorium, it's not allowed anywhere, but
Yeah, I'll
just so we can kind of see.
Well,
what
you have to
the-
be a
the
little careful
neighborhood-
here, because you might be asking two questions. Live work might be a conditional use allowed in more than one zone.
It is real allowed in mixed use, right?
So you have to you have to capture several different zones where it's a permitted,
So right now, I think it's just
Conditional
in neighborhood commercial.
no,
Because that area down
Yeah.
on Fort Union.
It's not
has-
neighborhood
has
commercial,
the
okay.
work. Yeah.
yeah, and we can look into that, but let's assume it's those two. It's not any of the other zones. So if there are, it's not in residential office, it's not in regional commercial. And then we only, and it's not in office, research and development. So I'll share our zoning map here. It is fairly limited in its application right now, at least. There you go. So, okay.
As
So-
far as like a specifically allowed use, live work, I believe is only in the neighborhood commercial zone. In our mixed use zone, I believe that when that development went in, live work was how the applicant met that mix of uses requirement, but it's not a specifically allowed use in the zone.
So they.
It's kind of a more broader
The
category.
residential mixed use,
I
yeah.
believe so.
so will this definition apply there?
That's a good question.
This definition would apply anywhere there's a use that says, you know, live work.
So and right now.
So if
our
someone came
code-
in and proposed live work in a mixed use zone, even though it's not specifically codified in there, we could then have a definition to say, okay, well, we've dealt with that, here's the definition.
That's what they're calling it. That's what staff would do is interpret it by that definition.
Where you see neighborhood commercial, we'll work west to east because it's not very extensive. We've got the little, there's one little random property on 1300 East there. And then this little stretch of businesses here, east of, I think, the Jiffy Lube or the ski shop on Fort Union.
The dentist.
There's a little dental
right?
office and a little, you know, strip office center and then, you know, a number of little storefronts there. Right by Union Park Avenue. A couple more parcels there. You can see just a few along Fort Union here in kind of these transition areas. These two purple properties are mixed use right now. Those were developed as live work projects. This being the 23 Views and then the other one by the fire station is Union Lofts.
What is the yellow?
Yellow is R2.
Okay,
Yep.
so that's the duplexes there.
Yep, exactly. So, and these are those little kind of mid-rise, low-rise, I guess, office buildings on Fort Union, just west of the, you know, where the liquor store is. And then we kind of get out of neighborhood commercial. Even these properties on Highland Drive are residential office, so that would not be allowed there. Let's get down here. I believe that this little shopping center down Highland Drive, south of Bengal Boulevard, is neighborhood commercial, as well as the Montessori school there. That's about it there. The area around Sumac and Rooted and up by 2700 East it's a little pocket of neighborhood commercial. Go north for a minute. The town center site is neighborhood commercial, although you know, that's obviously a different example that's kind of being developed by the city. See a few little properties in there across from Bella Vista. And then beyond that, I guess we have some up by the Forest Service property and the Sinclair gas station. And then the Smith's Shopping Center and the Wells Fargo property on Bengal Boulevard.
I'll just add that I think there are some parts of the city that in our general plan or future land use plan show could be rezoned to neighborhood commercial or mixed use, but are not currently zoned as such. so.
Yeah, a lot of Fort Union Boulevard, west of 2300 East has a long-range planning designation and mixed use.
In my understanding, and this could be some background, there's some goals, master plan goals for the community for neighborhood nodes. To kind of create center points for the community that whether you can get food or groceries or, you know, have like the live work component behind it where it's commercially oriented to benefit as an amenity for the city. And I think that that's why we have to be relatively conscious of this, just because this then connects, you know, as we start working on our traffic studies and our transportation plans, like what is the bikeability between each of these neighborhood nodes? And what is the landscape of that going to look like? And that's where, you know, if it is just pure multifamily, I think that's great. But if we are creating these neighborhood nodes, I think the commercial component is incredibly important, at least from what I would be seeing in live work, where I've seen it in other cities as well. So I think with this, you know, the 350-foot requirement that I was kind of imposing on that applicant was specifically for if there was townhome units, and the townhome region that you'd be looking at a, you know, 2,500 square foot townhome or 1,700 square foot townhome. But I really like the idea of percentage, ground level percentage, or just pure square footage percentage, to require that commercial component to it. Because I think that allows for it to be that gateway to the residential communities. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
So I do have a question about even, do we define commercial? Because that was a big discussion that we had when we were reviewing that application for the one by the Wells Fargo. Because commercial can be defined, and I wrote down this question and didn't have a chance to see if it's defined in the definitions in Cottonwood Heights, because I think that's important, because we say commercial, but what does that mean? Is it someone working from home? Or is it someone with a business?
I don't see
Right.
commercial
License.
specifically defined.
I didn't
definitions.
think I looked.
We have different commercial uses defined, but not
Yes.
what commercial means.
And what our proposed definition is saying is of the commercial element, it has to be one of the other non-residential uses within that chapter. In this case, neighborhood commercial, right? You can do retail, you can do office, you could do, you know, medical or dental office. Any of those would qualify as the commercial element
Component.
because it's an allowed by a conditional use, but an allowed use in the neighborhood commercial zone. And you could mix that in with residential.
And you may see this, but Commissioner Barnes has his hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're good.
Yes, I have just a brief question. Number one, I'm pleased that we're giving definition to the live work concept. I think that's prudent. My question is, how frequently in the past has this subject come to the commission's meetings?
Yeah, good question. In my memory, 3 projects have come through the planning commission. 2 of them in the mixed use zone, not, I guess, technically a live work use proposal, but more of a residential mixed use, and they proposed it as a live work product. And then one most recently as an actual live work use in the neighborhood commercial zone. So 3 that I can think of, but I may be missing some.
Okay, thank you.
So I agree with Commissioner Steinman on this too. I mean, I want us to use this. I think that's what the city council is hoping for, that we've seen that there's the market forces are incentivizing probably a little heavier towards the high density product, which is fine. I mean, the projects that we've approved, I think we're all very, very pleased with, but it's very, very light in terms of the commercial use. And so I'm less concerned about the definition, but I would hate to see these wonderful neighborhood commercial spots that we've kind of set aside for that purpose be snatched up, because the easiest way to make it revenue generating is to just put housing with a little light version of you can have your office in your house if you want. And then we find out that very, very few people are doing that. So I don't know, I hate for us to be too descriptive or too prescriptive about what we're doing, but if we do make a definition that allows more license to take current zoning and use it to interpret as a housing product primarily. That makes me a little nervous. I'd also love to see us use this do this through the lens of form-based code. You know, when we think about what we want those nodes to look like, especially on Port Union, where, you know, the city council's got this front of mind right now. How do we phrase this in a way that's going to incentivize those very, very specific looks and uses that we would like to see there? And
Yeah.
if you feel like this definition is going to encourage that, I'm less concerned about the technicalities.
That's a good point that you bring up, Commissioner Mills, is that the council is still slowly moving form-based code forward. If that moves forward and continues to do so, you know, that would cover a lot of the land use on Fort Union. So then we'd be looking at this application mainly in these kind of, you know, the Bengal corridor, maybe on Highland Drive in a few areas, not a wide range of, you know, even potential options where we'd see this. But that 50% ground level commercial does kind of get at, we want as much as possible that commercial activity on the ground floor by the public right of way. And that's where that kind of line came from. But it is saying right now, and this is maybe a point to discuss, that the commercial and the residential are used by the same occupant. It's one unit, they live there, they work there, whether they open their doors to the public or not. It's not, you know, someone lives above and another person you know, owns or uses the commercial space. It's all one.
Could we maybe extend that? Because as I'm looking at communities, neighborhoods that do implement live work, you know, I know that Mill Creek has implemented this quite a bit. I know that Murray and South Salt Lake City as well. And some of the best communities that I've been in are, in a way, live work. You know, if you look at the nodes of 15th and 15th or 9th and 9th, you know, you've got condos above on 9th and 9th, and then we've got incredible food down below. I'm not saying I want to turn our community into 9th and 9th or Sugar House and some of those small little community nodes, but, you know, if you look at a lot of the main streets of America, a lot of it's commercial space down below, and you might have the barber living up above, but then you've got the barber down below, you might have another family up there. I don't necessarily know if we want to restrict that. I think we want to allow for some autonomy to it.
Either way, yeah.
Because I go back to the conversations that we were having 5 years ago as a city of these neighborhood nodes and creating that bikeable, walkable community to ice cream shops or barber or, you know, your doctor, whatever that is, you know, medical plazas. I think that creates a really great emphasis of what my understanding of live work would be.
Yeah, if there's no, I mean, we don't have a concern from staff one way or the other. It's probably easier to administer if we don't have to double check and consistently check, hey, do you live there and work there? I mean, that's fine with.
I think that gives us the option. We can either have either or, where you've got 25% of the ground level needs to be commercial.
Could you, I have
Oh,
that
yeah.
right here.
Can you pull it up or do you want me to share?
I can.
I have about a 15-minute rant here. So
Okay.
I'm not sure if anyone's ready.
Fire away.
Foursquare 7 years ago?
Yeah, I'll start there. I think the mechanism here is a problem. And it showed itself to be a problem in this last application. Conditional uses are widely misunderstood. And I think the way we've taken conditional uses and tried to expand them to be not only about use, but about development standards is really problematic. And here we're saying a permitted conditional use, not a permitted use, but a permitted conditional use is live work. And we're trying to say, what would that use look like? What is the impact of that use? And if it's an allowed permitted use or an allowed conditional use, then you're talking about the use. What percentage of the square footage is this or that is a development standard, not a use. And it's really, really hard. You know, someone could say, yeah, this is my garage, it's a commercial, I'm going to use it for my car, which is my business car. that's a commercial use? I don't know.
Well, that's why I was asking the question about what defines.
So
Commercial
I
use.
think one thing that was helpful for me was to go back and study. I chalked myself up for an hour of training here, so wherever that's list is kept. What's allowed in the context of conditional uses? It's about a page and a half. Can I borrow your readers?
Absolutely.
I left without them. So this is
Kind of dirty, but
the Utah League of Cities and Towns Powers and Duties Handbook for Municipal Officers. Conditional uses can be problems for cities and towns. They are a problem because many cities and towns think that they have more discretion than they actually do in granting or denying a conditional use permit. These cities and towns treat conditional use permit applications like zoning change requests. A conditional use application is not the same as a request to change a zone. A conditional use is defined as a use that, because of its unique characteristics for potential impact on the city or town, may not be compatible in some areas, or may be compatible only if certain conditions are required that mitigate or eliminate the detrimental impacts. It has been common practice for Utah cities and towns to include many conditional uses in their land use ordinances. Very often this occurs because the drafters of the ordinance cannot make the hard decisions about whether or not to permit or disallow a particular use. Sometimes conditional uses are used because cities or towns think that conditional uses give planning commissions or city councils more discretion in whether or not to allow certain uses. This cannot be further from the actual situation. A conditional use only exists if it is created by the land use ordinance. It is not sufficient to justify a potential use as a conditional use in a land use ordinance. The state statute requires that standards be set forth in the ordinance for the granting or denying of the conditional use. I'm not sure where those standards exist in this particular ordinance, but a conditional use must be approved if reasonable conditions are proposed or can be imposed to mitigate the reasonably anticipated detrimental effects that the proposed use in accordance with standards that are contained in the ordinance. If there are no identifiable standards contained in the ordinance, there will be no basis for denying the permit. The granting or denial of a conditional use permit is not a legislative act. It is an administrative act. This is a significant distinction. Because it is an administrative act, it will be reviewed by the courts in a less deferential manner than a legislative act. In addition, a city or town must provide an appeals process from any decision on conditional use permit applications. This appeal process must allow anyone who is aggrieved by the decision to that either granted or denied the conditional use to appeal the decision. This appeal must be to someone other than the body. So I'm not going to go through that. Another significant difference between the granting of a conditional use and a legislative act is the role of the public. While it is appropriate to take public comment and even hold public hearings on the granting or denial of individual conditional use permits, public clamor is not to be considered. It is appropriate to seek from the public factual information about whether or not the applicant for the permit can meet the standards in the ordinance. It is not appropriate to seek from the public their emotional feelings about the application. Whether or not to grant a conditional use permit is not a political decision or a popularity contest. It must be solely based on the standards in the ordinance itself. The applicant can either meet the standard in the ordinance for the permit or not meet the standards. The best practice is to avoid as much as possible having conditional uses. If the use is not appropriate, the ordinance should make it not a permitted use. If the use is appropriate, it should be a permitted use. Conditional uses should be the exception and not the rule. So I say that in this case, conditional uses are the only uses in the zone. There is not a single permitted use. It's not good practice. It might have been at some time good practice, but it is not good practice. And to further complicate it by adding development standards, which could be in the zone, if 25% of the square footage needs to be commercial, that should be a development standard. That's not a use. It's not a use issue, in my opinion. The other thing to note here is that there are several overlapping conditional uses that are allowed in the zone that are just as problematic. Among the allowed permitted uses or conditional uses is home office. What's the definition of home office? I have a home that I have an office in. So there are just so many problems that it's not really about one definition. It's about the whole structure of how you do it. If you don't want people to live in these units, then don't let that be allowed. You can just say that's not, it's not permitted. But if they're permitted to live there and they can work or office there as well, then you are kind of stuck with that as being what you have said that zone is good for. And you can only say no, not because you don't like it, but not because it doesn't create a better situation, only if it creates a detrimental situation that you can't resolve.
I mean, I think that what you're saying aligns with maybe the concerns with having, first of all, I think this needs to be, live work needs to be defined, okay? Aside from whether it's in the NC zone or anything else, we need to define that. My thought is that it should be taken out of, or as a conditional use. We can't fix the fact that it's only conditional uses in this zone right now. I mean, but.
Sure we can.
Well, I don't,
That'd be a separate.
We
Yeah,
can amend the language there just as easily as anywhere else.
And I fully agree with you on this.
Yes.
I think this is such an interesting zone. And I think conditional uses, as the League of Cities and Towns, it's not the practice. But that's what we have in this zone right now. So I think that, as Lucy was saying, I think we need to define live work or eliminate live work. And I think in this zone right now, and specifically the NC zone, that's why I wanted to look at the map of where is the NC zone? What is the positive impact in NC zone? Or what is the negative impact in NC zone? And what things can prompt negative impact in NC zone? I think those are the questions we need to ask, because right now, the live work is only in that space. There's other areas where you can have a live work component to it, but it's more so just by product, not by zone. So I think kind of what you're looking at here is conditional uses are an issue. And I think that's the biggest issue that we have, and the mere fact that we have a zone that conditional use is
The only use.
that's a massive issue, because if multifamily was a use in, so, and I'll just use this just as an analogy, it doesn't matter on the application, but if multifamily was a use in neighborhood commercial, there's going to be certain minimum requirements to being able to use that use. So the mere fact that the only use that is allowed for certain square footages and certain size of project is live work, and we don't have an appropriate allocation for that.
It's not just live work though.
Home
Home office.
I don't think is in neighborhood
I don't
commercial.
think
because there would be
Home
no
occupation, home preschool. If you want to look at and then residential.
And that'd be in
mixed
residential, correct?
housing.
No, those are permitted in
Are all-
this zone.
Conditional.
Nothing's permitted.
No, there are
Conditional.
conditionals in this zone, which means if someone comes and asks, and they say, I want to do a home occupation here, you have to say, what's the detrimental impact of that? I mean, what you're talking about is, hey, I want it to be more commercial. That's your want. It's not detrimental if someone doesn't do that. So you have a really hard time denying someone who says, I'm going to do a home occupation here, which means I can have it be my home and I can do an occupation, whatever that means.
Well, and an applicant could come to us and meet the minimum standards. If it was going residential, they could build 2 homes there potentially, but then they would need to meet the setback requirements. And then they could apply for a conditional use permit for home office or officing out of their home, which I think just changes the metrics. It doesn't give them benefit for additional density.
But in
I
this
think
case,
the benefit for density really is live work.
I don't think so. I don't think there's any connection. So you have two sets of requirements that you have to evaluate. One is what can you build here?
Absolutely.
And you can build under the definitions in that zone, you can build townhomes. You can absolutely build a footprint that is a townhome. It's allowed. If you meet the setbacks, if you meet the height requirements, you can build a building that has lots of doors in it and lots of walls and could look like a townhome. That's part of the development standard. Then the next question is, what are you permitted to use that building that meets the requirements for? So home occupation is one of the things you could use it for.
I don't necessarily know if you could build a townhome, and we'll have to ask, could they build a townhome project there under home occupation standards?
I think that's a good question, that specific example. What you're saying, Commissioner Shelton, is you could build a building that looks like anything as long as it meets the building standards. And then along with that, you say, someone makes the argument, I'm gonna use this for home occupations to try to get around the intent of this
Or
code, which is to have a
Home preschool or
Absolutely.
anything that has the word home in it.
I think in practice, it means if there's a residential component in one of these projects, the residential portion of that can be used for a home occupation, or, which is defined elsewhere in the ordinance, or a home preschool, which is defined elsewhere in the ordinance. But if there's a concern with, say, someone could come in and say, that's all I want to do here, and get around the intent to have commercial, then I can see where you're coming from. In which case, I'd suggest if we want live workspace to be kind of the guiding mixed use land use type within the neighborhood commercial zone, we could, or you could suggest to the city council that we, as part of defining that better, we eliminate some of these other uses that could potentially be loopholes as well.
I think you're onto something on this, and I think that's what's exciting about this is this is a very important part of our city and the landscape of our city for the next 50 to 100 years. And if everything is conditional, we've got massive issues. There's too many holes in that regards. So I think if we are able to look at, once again, either eliminating live work out of our vocabulary or defining live work, which is what we've been tasked to do, then I think the next thing that we need to look at is what uses are going to be approved uses and by right use for neighborhood commercial. Is there any other zoning that everything in that zone is conditional use, or is it just neighborhood commercial?
Residential office is close, but it allows residential, purely residential as a permitted use, and then any commercial element is conditional.
So I have a question. So, I mean, this has been done for hundreds of years all over the world. So this idea of like something commercial on the first floor, I wonder, I see your point, just in the name of housekeeping and just, if what we're intending to do is that we want that first floor to be truly a business, commercial type of a purpose, how much brain damage is it if we just say, well, these two, the people on the bottom and the people on the top can be disarticulated, and that we, the way this is done all over the world, so people live above a business, maybe they're part of the business, maybe they're not part of the business. And we stop telling people, if you're gonna get into this, you have to own a home business. I mean, it is hard enough as a business owner to find a space that suits my needs as a business owner, and then to find a space above it that would suit my needs as a homeowner. That's a unicorn. So there's a part of me that says, what if there's just places for people to live up above? There's a separate entrance, and Yeah, you have to go outside and then you go into your business and then you go upstairs to your house. If somebody buys that, or the person upstairs owns the whole building and leases out the business underneath, or the person on the bottom leases up the space up top. However that's structured, this live work, I'm starting to see that we just need to treat them as two separate entities. And I don't know that we're ever gonna come to a perfect percentage, or we're gonna create such a restrictive product, either we're gonna have to make a ton of exceptions, or people are gonna be fudging the rules immediately, which I think is what's already happened with the first two. And we just created some residential spaces that have kind of an awkward first floor that looks like it might be for doing some work. And I'm,
So, yeah, that's great. So maybe what I'm hearing as a direction, we can come back with this. We don't have to do this all tonight, is we could take a look at staff, if the commission's in agreement, and consolidate some of these uses that have these residential connotations or the potential for loopholes, or, you know, to Commissioner Shelton's point, maybe the definition is a little more broad, and then we have the standards, the 25%, you know, floor area, the 50% frontage on public street, that could be codified as a development standard within the ordinance rather than in the definition. I don't know where to go with the conditional use versus permitted use debate, although I agree. I don't know how this got set up originally the way it did. I don't
might
know
have
if we can
voted
do
yes
that
on
as
it at
part
some
of
point
this,
in my life, so I don't know.
or if that's you know, the next chapter of ordinance cleanup. Again, in the grand scheme of things, we don't have a ton of neighborhood commercials, so how much time and effort we want to put into fixing that problem right now, when the, you know, the eventual use of it is going to be fairly limited, I don't know.
We've talked about cleaning up uses in other zones. We run into
Yeah.
this issue quite often where our code defines uses that are pretty archaic.
I mean, CR, we have drugstore, not pharmacy, and it's like.
We had
yeah,
class 3
pharmacies
private
all over the
clubs. I
place,
mean,
yeah.
yeah.
So maybe what I would
Conditional
suggest.
uses generally exist all through the code,
They're all over the place, yeah.
not to this extent everywhere, but
Yeah, so if you're okay with it, I can come back with consolidated resident mixed use kind of use type. We'll probably still call it live workspace, but it'll represent all these things we're talking about. We'll eliminate the requirement for the same occupant or owner to be in both of them. We'll keep the percentage standards in place, but as development standards rather than definition.
That's great.
And then we'll try to eliminate some of the extraneous residential uses.
And have it align with the definition of neighborhood commercial, because it's designed to be a transition zone going from residential to commercial, or
Sure.
vice versa.
I'd love to
So-
see it be phrased in ways that commit us to the commercial for that first floor.
Yeah, yeah, and it's in there right now. Let me pull it up one more time.
Yeah,
Can I ask you a quick
eliminating
question
the
while you're
piece
doing
that
that?
says 25%. It should just be
Yeah.
the first floor is commercial.
Some of that
well, you
is,
got parking.
you've got parking, or you've got, you know, common entrance if it's a multi-unit building, you know, clubhouse area, things like that.
See what solutions you can come up with.
We have language
Makes
similar to
sense.
that in our form-based code draft, where
Yeah.
it's not the whole first level as 100% commercial, but it is enough of it to get the point across.
A lot of what you guys have said tonight reminds me of the form-based code.
Part of me
It
might actually
it
kill
really
two birds
goes
with
the
one
same
stone.
way.
Yes.
What if we converted our neighborhood commercial to form-based code across the board? I know that
I
might
think,
be,
yeah,
We talked about that the very, very,
we
very
did,
beginning.
yeah.
we have. I think it's probably a next project of expanding that form-based code, because we have to create probably a separate form district for that and add it in.
Okay.
I'd love to get, you know, the first form-based code adopted and.
And
Figure that
it
out
sounds like
first.
you're gonna get one taken out
Yeah,
rather than one
yeah,
added in.
yeah, their
From last
discussion
night's
is
discussion.
they wanted to eliminate the Union Park area from that and try it elsewhere first, which that's okay. That's their.
I think they're mixed on that. From that discussion, I got that there's some very, I think they're still malleable.
Yeah,
I think so, but I think they're not very mixed. I think.
So if we can
They're
just go back, let's
mostly
go back to live work
okay.
for a second.
yeah, so.
Let's
Yeah.
So how it is right
let's
now
wrap
is
this
of the
up.
total area, 25% of the total area of the use has to be commercial. The other portion of it can be residential. That's typical of mixed use projects. You typically are a little heavier in residential than commercial.
Yep.
But it's not the 100 square foot units we were seeing that were concerning before. And then of that, 50% of the units frontage at ground level along the public right of way has to be that commercial use. It doesn't make a lot of great sense if you've got your commercial use in the back of the site where no one can see it, especially if you're trying to get street visibility. So that's where that came from, but
Remember on Fort Union, part of the why that worked is they put parking underneath. So if we go back to this main floor is commercial. You gotta solve the parking as a separate issue. I like having underneath. I mean, that's partially why I think created the brain damage was. If you're putting the parking on the same, then we get in that percentage. I don't know the exact answer to that, but it does clean it up if the parking is not part of that calculation somehow.
I think Lucy's point is really critical here. You now have a definition that depends on another word that you don't have a definition for. Right, and so commercial is whatever I want to be that's commercial. I mean, if
Well, I think they have a definition for commercial in the code.
they just said they
It's,
didn't.
it's specific
Yeah.
uses. We don't define, I mean,
So,
we define, when you go in that code and you see office, we define office. You see daycare, we define daycare, you know.
but in this case, you say it 25% has to be commercial. What does that mean? Does it mean that it has to be open to the public? Does it have to be public facing commercial? Does it have to be in my garage where I package my shipments to send them out for my home base?
Well, what
What
it
is
says,
commercial?
any commercial use within a live work unit must be included as a permitted or conditional use in the underlying zone.
So what are the permitted uses?
Um,
Or did we just loop back on top of ourselves there?
no, that's okay. I mean,
We're
and that's
running
where
up,
we'll,
we're running up against 6 p.m.
Yeah,
so,
I'm, so I definitely
Um,
suggest that we,
you know, it's-
move this to the May work session.
Okay.
And be committed to bring it to closure in May.
But is the council feeling like they want this ASAP?
we just have 180 days, otherwise the moratorium
And
lifts and we're just.
when
back.
did that clock start? Was that in February?
Was it in the memo?
Was it
I
March?
think it might be in the memo.
Oh, it must be in.
February 18th, 2025, so you have 6
February.
months from that date.
Okay, so
August.
we've got to August.
Yeah, okay, we'll bring it
And
back.
it's not like they're gonna make a run on us if we aren't done.
We'll do some more work, we'll bring it back.
Yeah, but I also don't want it to. Okay, we are at 6 o'clock.
Motion to adjourn.
I second.
Yes. I'm in favor.
Commissioner Simon, motion, Commissioner Smith, second. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, see you next.